Hey everybody, Tony Wyatt here from Wyatt & Dad Cobbler Company, and we've got a special project for you today. We've got a pair of rare 9003s, and we're going to convert them from this cushion sole, mainly because it's old and crumbly, to a logger sole. So let's see how well a moc-toe comes out as a logger. All right, so this is a vintage boot. I don't know if it classifies as vintage, but it was made in 2007. And you can tell by the yellowing of the sole and everything, it sat in storage somewhere ever since then. So, trying to be a little delicate about how I cut the soles off. So I don't cut things I shouldn't, and the glue has gone through things it shouldn't have gone through. So standard methods of removal are not the same. Seems to be coming off okay. Now for some of you cobblers out there, some people use razor knives for cutting soles off, and you see us using this type of knife. It's called a moc-toe knife if you want to order one. The reason I like it is a razor knife is so sharp and it doesn't have the sensitivity that I can feel with this knife as I'm using it. So I prefer it as a knife of choice for cutting soles off. So we got the sole off here, and check this out. These have a instead of a cork filler, they have a foam filler, but it's not a cheap foam filler. It's a Poron or PPT. So it doesn't bottom out. It gives good shock absorbency and everything. Got some hot glue here we're gonna have to get out and everything, so when we put the new filler in, we don't have that being a lump under the person's foot. And since these are so stained and stuff from corrosion, we know that everything is really dry, so we know the welts will be too dry even though they're in perfect shape. As far as looks goes, they're going to be really dry, so we're going to do new welts on this because otherwise it could fall apart later. To get the hot glue out, I think what we're going to have to do is get that hot again. So I'm going to put it in the heat box for a minute and warm that sucker up. Okay, so this area right here is the most sensitive area when you're dealing with a footbed, because that's where all the pressure is at on the ball of the foot. So anytime we're replacing cork or foam or anything like that, we want to make sure to get this area extremely smooth, because if I leave just that piece of foam and put cork over it, over time it'll make an indentation in the footbed, and it'll feel like the customer it'll feel like he has rocks in his shoes, and they're actually underneath. So that's another reason why I'm always talking about replacing the cork. No matter when you resole it, you always replace the cork, because if the cork gets dry and rough in any areas, it can cost you over time. Because if he comes back a month, 6 months or whatever later and says, hey, my boots hurt my feet, then you've got to redo all of this job for free. And you know, just a few seconds of doing the job right saves you from ruining your reputation, as well as upsetting your customer, and as well as having to do work for free. Okay, so that's nice and smooth now. Now we can start taking the welts off. So So what they did was when they ran the stitching, they overlapped right here. So the welt's not wanting to pull off like you see it doing in a lot of our videos. So I've got to find the end of the stitching and get it going until I get up here. And then maybe I can get it to start breaking loose. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, see, look at there, that welt just pulled right apart. And this is tearing off easy, so it's not giving a lot of resistance when we break welts sometimes just because of the resistance. Alright, now it's time for some new welts. While I'm staining the welts and stuff, I'm going to condition this up so it can be drying in. That way I can get conditioner down in here in this area real good. And this will be sitting in while I'm doing the welts. So I've got Bic 4 in a squirt bottle here. A lot of people don't realize you can squirt it, but it's squirtable out of a squirt bottle. I didn't have to dilute it or anything. And then I use a nice horsehair brush for just making sure I get every crack and crevice conditioned. And on this pair, because they were stored somewhere, it was apparent that they were stored somewhere by the soles and stuff, I want to get a good coat of conditioner on the inner sole on both sides. So I'm going to do this side, and then I like to take and squirt it inside, and I can turn the boot upside down, and that way I can get the leather liner and the whole inside of the boot, because a lot of people don't condition their boots on the insides. They don't think about it, but you know, you perspire every single day, so you know, the uppers on the outside get bad weather when it's raining and stuff like that, but the inside gets your perspiration every single day. So don't neglect your inner soles and your insides. That's why we see so many Redwings that are and other high quality boots with leather inner soles that come in and they're all dried up and cracking. It's because they were not taken care of the same way people take care of the outside. So all right, this is ready to sit and dry while we do the welts. So when I'm making welting, I like to do one, I wrap it around like this all the way around, and then I overlap about an inch. That way I make sure I've got enough, and then I make my second one. But another thing that I like to check on my welting, see, a welt comes with a splice. Right there's a splice in the welting. So you don't want to start your welting and come around and have that splice right in the toe, because that's a heavy stress area when you go to bring it down, and that splice can break right out. And see that right there? Lined up perfectly with the center of the toe. So we wouldn't want to use that in that direction. So what we'd want to do is see if it'll come around this way, and see if the splice ends up in the toe again. Then we don't want to use this piece of welting on this size boot. And guess what? The splice came out in the toe again, so I'm going to have to use a different piece for this boot. This one has splicing here, so, and that splicing's coming out in the straightaway back here, so everything will be okay. So we can use this piece, so I'm going to have to cut another piece and line it up right. So as you can see, the original welt had a finish on it, and I sanded it off. And that's because this customer wanted what we call medium antique. So to get our medium antique edging, the way I do it is I use a brown edge dressing, Vibram's edge dressing. Smear it on here real good. Don't let it dry. Take a rag, and immediately wipe it back off. Now this looks like it's a good color, but it's going to lighten up as it dries, and as we flex it for working it in, it gets real light, and that actually becomes our light antique color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a real dark brown polish on this to make it really dark, or make it medium antique. So I like to start somewhere when they have a heel seat, somewhere near the heel seat. You don't want to start too far back in the heel right here, because what will happen is the welt will push away and you'll end up with like a weird looking V, or you've got to cut it and try to make that match up. Whereas here, if you start in this area, then the two joints will butt in together and they'll be nice and tight, and you don't end up with a gap. So we're going to start right here, and as I've explained before in other videos, you don't go straight through because you come out missing your lip. You find your hole, line up, and you go through at an angle, and that way you're on the back side of that lip. And if you haven't heard this before, I did it in one of our other videos where I covered very detailed about how to get started on your welt. So I get my two threads even, and then I start working, finding my holes, work it through, so I'm not poking new holes into the boot or the gimming. Pull it through, slide it through the loop. Pull this in, hold this one tight. You'll feel it pop and go right into the middle there, and then I cinch it tight. When they were sewing, somebody must have forced this one a little bit. That stitch is a little long. It won't hurt anything. I just like to match every hole for hole. And typically, a Goodyear welt stitcher is stitching closer stitches like this one. was a little difficult to see on the wool side. So I checked the gimming side to double check myself because I thought I was spacing out too far. But sometimes when somebody's feeding something through a stitcher, they can get a spot of non-resistance and get a little slip. Now when you're coming around the toe, you want to pull your loop through, pull it down, and before you pull it tight, lift this up a little bit and then pull it. That way your welt is standing away from the boot and you don't have to force it, because if you don't do that, it'll be so tight up against the toe of the boot, it'll be very difficult for you to bring it down, and that puts stress and strain on everything and can actually mess up the look of your job. And see, now I'm in the straightaway, so I don't really have to worry about lifting that up every time because I already got it the way I wanted it around the toe. And I'll do the same thing when I go around the heel. Alright, so now we're coming up to where we're going to do the butt joint. So some people like to take and slide it underneath and mark that and then cut this off at that angle right there. And it may be accurate, I don't know. I overlap, find my welt end on the other and cut it off with my knife. And see, I get a nice butt. So now we just got to do the last few stitches, and as you can see on the heel part right here, this is turned up and it turns down, but it doesn't fold right up against the heel because I was doing the lifting as I was going around. That makes it a lot easier. So when I do a 360 welt, I like to start a little bit away from the welt end. That way I can come around here like this and then I go to an overlap. And it helps bring all my lines together. Give me a good solid joint. And then I go where I started. And what I do here is I give a little bit more slack than normal. I come in this way and I give a little bit of slack. I don't give it tight. That way I can pull it through here. Catch my knot. Pull this through. Like that. And then I do a once over, pull tight, and then a 1, 2 over, pull tight. Now if you're wondering why my two ends didn't come out the same, it's because I developed a knot in the wax thread as I was sewing, and I had to cut off part of the end, so otherwise it would have been the same. So you see how this sticks up right here, around here. I like to take and seat it in. Seat it in with my hammer like this. See, now that's a lot smoother transition. It's time for the steel shank. Because we're converting this from a cushion sole that doesn't come with a shank to a sole that has a step-up heel, we're going to do new shanks in it and put the 3-rib shank like comes in the Iron Ranger, and then we'll do the cork. Alright, so this customer ordered the thick leather midsoles, which is pretty close to 1/4 of an inch thick. So that's what we're going to do on these. All right, so we've got the steel shank in place. Now we're going to cover it with cork. So a lot of people ask me what kind of cork I use. I use what's called heavy D cork, and the reason is it happens to be the exact same thickness as the cavity of that the gimming creates, so I don't ever have to do double layers in there. It costs more than other cork taps, but it also comes larger than they do, so it fills even big cavities, and I don't have to search for something when I'm working on a big boot. But the thickness is the main reason I like it. Okay, so as many of you know, we carry many different colored threads, so we have to change the thread on our machine quite often. So I have two different spools set up down here. I leave the black all the time, and then I like to change out this thread on this side. The way I do that is I take the top thread coming out of the machine, wrap it over the top of my new thread, tie me a nice little knot, and I pull it real tight. And then I loosen the wax stripper up real good, and I pull my thread. When I feel the knot getting there, I give it a little tug, and it comes right through. And now my thread is changed, and I just slide that off. Come back up in here, come in through here, and then I tighten my wax stripper back down. Mash the pedal, check my tension, get my tension like I like it. Yeah, right there. Now that is ready to go. But the bobbin is also out, so I've got to wind a new bobbin. When you do that, this has a lump on this side, and this is smooth. The lump always faces you, so the lump goes up, drop it on the bobbin thing. Wrap around the top, wrap around the bottom, then wrap around the top again. And then we get it going. With braided thread, synthetic thread, you don't have to have it through the lube, and you don't have to have it through the or wax like you do the linen thread. So it's easier just to wind it from the outside like I just did than it is to run it through the machine the old-fashioned way. Pull that down into the tension bar, and that controls the tension on your bobbin. Slide this in and close her up. Now we're ready. I check my channel knife depth to make sure it's what I want for my midsoles. And then this right here is your stitch length. So on this particular job, I want to do more stitches per inch because I want to give it that more vintage look. So I'm going to set it back. This is the longest, and the further that way, the shorter it gets. I like this setting right here for what I want. We're getting ready to do, so that the boots won't be too stiff when the customer gets them back. We kind of flex the soles in and help break them in for you a little bit. Otherwise, the boot would feel like a board for a little while with the foot trying to flex all that. Alright, so this is called a welt press because, as you can see, it's pressing that welt down to the midsole, pressing the blues together. Okay, so this is a depth guide on the stitcher right here. As you can see, this is moving at the same time. That's what tightens it in place. So what I do is I loosen that up, and then I slide the boot in to where I think I want it, and I roll it through and give it a little bump through like this, so the awl comes up through the sole. And then I roll the awl back down, and I check and see that's not real close to the edge, but it's not jammed up against the boot, so that's where I want it to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide it back in here and set it at that setting again without rolling it through, and I'm going to tighten that down. Now I'm going to double check myself. Right there. Yeah, see my hole's in the middle of my welt where I want it to go. That means when I stitch around, if I keep this up against this guide the whole way, I should have a nice even stitch all the way around the boot. Okay, so that I don't poke extra holes in the welt from where I did my test, I line my thing up so I'm going to go right back in that same hole again. That's where it's going to be my starting point. So as you can see, I did a lot tighter stitch because I wanted to do more stitches per inch for this boot and the look I was going after. So, and as you can see, it's nice and even away from the edge all the way around. Now it's time to put the sole on, but before I want to close this channel up a little bit. So you see me hammering down the stitches or the channel to cover over the stitches. Even though it'll never be walked on because it's going to be covered by a sole, we still want them down in there to be protected. So when it's time for a resole, we don't have to hit the stitches and mess everything up. All right. like to bring up a big blob of cement, put it on the center of the sole, spread it all over the boot real good, or the sole real good, and then I thin it back out because you don't want to leave any globs anywhere. Alright, so we're going to try to get it centered. So what I do is I kind of lay it up at the edge. I feel with my fingers on each side. Feels like the tread is good. The logo feels centered. The back feels good. We're ready to stick this in place. And then hammer. Alright, so we've got the sole stuck on here. Now these rubber soles are such a dense rubber, we like to let all the green time get out of the glue before we start cutting on it and sanding it, getting it hot again, making that glue let go before it's, because it's still got green time. So we're going to let these sit overnight and we'll be back tomorrow to finish these up. Alright, so we're back. We had to let these sit overnight and let the green time get out of the glue. So now everything is securely bonded. We don't have to worry about delamination from, you know, rushing the job and sanding it out. Because when you're sanding, this rubber gets hot and the glue is heat activated. So if it's fresh, it causes it to kind of want to let go and you can get peeling around the edges. So now it's the time to start putting these things together and finishing them up for you. All right, so you see I've got the boot set up here, but it's up against the blade, and we want to be careful not to let the blade make scars on the side of the boot. So what a lot of people make the mistake of doing is tilting the boot so that they can cut right in this area, but in doing so, you have to be careful because you'll cut at an angle and end up undercutting your sole. And then to get things right, you have to sand away part of your welt, getting close to your stitches. So the thing to do is to hold the boot right like this and keep it level as you go around the 5 and 1 in that area. Well, you want to keep it level, you know, the whole way around, but especially in that area, that's where people have a tendency to want to tilt it. Alright, so now the next thing to do is to attach the bases to the bottom of the sole. And so what I like to do is I like to rough up my base around here, and I like to go ahead and pre-breast it right in this area, sand this nice and smooth. That way I don't have to worry about trying to scar up my sole with the breaster when I'm sanding that. So the first thing I'm going to do is prepare my base, then I'll make my marks and then get things ready to attach the heels. I'm also going to remove this heel pad. It comes in, it hides where you put nails through the inner sole on the inside. That covers it so that you're not standing on those nails and stuff. So we'll put that back in when we're done. Alright, so now I'm going to lay my base on here, get it like I want it, make sure I've got it sitting where I want. And on rubber I use ink. On leather I scar it with a knife. Now we got to rough this up so we get a good bond. So you've heard me talk about using CDC on this dense rubber, and here you see me using our all-purpose cement for putting the bases on. The reason is because we need a good bond, but it's not a flex area where the heels are. And the rubber will be bonding to leather and then nailed with nails. So you've got two things going on: one, the nails, and two, no flex area. So you don't really need the power of the CDC to hold this together. It's not like our AP doesn't bond to this material as well. It's just that CDC bonds better, and we just don't want to risk delamination during wear. And you know, our customers are from all over the country and even world now, so you know, it's kind of tough for them to get back by and have a little thing re-glued if they have to. The 100 heel comes with a cup designed in it, and then it has washers in the middle for the nails to go through and hold everything together. But because of the style we're doing with bases, we need to remove the cup, and that way when we put this on, you don't end up with a product that looks like this. So I'm going to go ahead and level this out a little bit, get them even, and then I'm going to balance the boots to sit with the heels that we have, and everything will look symmetrical. Okay, so this one came out pretty good. It's almost perfectly level. You can see there's just a little teeter-totter in there. So I want to get that out, and that way the boot will walk properly. So now you can see we've got it sitting like we want it. There's no teeter-totter. Everything's good. She's ready to put the heels on. So now we're going to use 10/8 iron shoe nails, because I measured through here. You can see it'll go inside through the inner sole and clench, which is why I removed the heel pad. Iron shoe nails come in different lengths: 8/8, 10/8, 12/8, 14/8. 14/8 is the longest I know of. They're a booger bear to drive, so I can't imagine trying to drive a 16/8. For those new cobblers, be careful driving these when you've got your fingers around them, because they can easily fold over your finger, and man, that hurts. Now you can see where each one of them went in and they clenched into the inner sole. And then when we re-glue the heel pad in, it'll cover all those, and so the foot will never feel those nail heads, because they're clenched inside of there. All right, so now it's time to put the heels on. Line that breast up real good. As you saw earlier, I was pre-shaping that. Now I'm going to use these 7/8 hardened threaded nails to go down through the washers and into the leather bases. All right, so this boot, the customer wanted medium antique edging. So what I'm going to do to get that is cover it with Vibram's brown edge dressing. And then we will wipe the edge dressing off, and it gives us our light antique. And then I'll polish and seal the edge dressing with a brown polish, wax polish. And that'll give us our medium. So the nice thing is you can literally just touch your edges up from time to time with a dark brown paste or any brown that you like paste polish. You can use cream, it just doesn't shine as well. Now this looks pretty medium brown right now because it's wet. But as it dries, it'll turn that light antique orangey color, and this is really what the customer wants, is it to look like this. And that's why we're going to put the brown polish to it after, is to bring this color back out. All right, so we have our finished product now. So we converted these from these hard crusty type soles to the original Redwing sole actually, but they had gotten hard and yellowed from being stored for so long. We got rid of the PPT filler, put cork filler in there, threw some steel shanks in there for the support because we were converting it up to a step down heel. And it's got the medium antique edging. We went back with the cream stitching so it matches the stitching in the upper. And I'm really pleased with the way these came out. We did do the brass screws in the forefoot, and I just love the way they came out. I think it's going to be a really cool boot. One thing I did forget to mention is these were a collaboration between Woolrich and Redwing, and they were exclusive to Japan when they were made. So pretty cool boots. If you like what you saw, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and be sure and let us know what you think. We love to read your comments. Let's go hit the slopes.